What's up, everyone? Good morning. Hope everyone's doing good. Getting set up here with my light. It's always too bright. Always too bright. It's always a situation where it's too bright. But we're adapting. This is what's happening every time I do an IG live. It's always has a new thing to deal with. I'm gonna open up the chat here. See if there's anyone. Okay, good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. Today we're going to talk about hips. And this is a really, I really appreciate everyone filling out that little questionnaire, my little survey. Probably looks so blown out. My little survey about what you want me to talk about in these morning rambles. Super open to your suggestions. Really looking forward to talking about hips because it's a big one. Obviously, hips, I don't know too many people who have loose and open hips and feel really stoked about the situation of their hips. And I'm going to hopefully tackle some of the most common issues, myths, misconceptions. And to be clear, I can't in this type of scenario offer you direct advice on what you should do for your situation and what you're going through. Everyone's body and anatomy is different, and what is definitely kind of incorrect about the approaches that are kind of very commonly described online. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what stretching is, what will get you loose hips, and I'm hopefully going to answer some of those questions about what's actually going on in your hips when you say you have tight hips. And if you have any questions while I'm talking about this, just drop them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them. So first of all, your hips, I always like to look at things from a functional anatomy perspective first. So when we're looking at the hips, we want to ask ourselves, what's the function of our hips, right? And really the function of our hips came from the reality that we went from this position millions of years ago, or actually more like this position, millions and millions of years ago, to something more like this, to this, to this, to then being somewhat bipedal, somewhere in between. That's what you see with chimpanzees and stuff like that. There's somewhere in between, to fully standing up and walking on two legs. So when we're looking at functional anatomy in relation to the human body, we're really looking at locomotion. We're looking at the idea that we move through space using this piece, this equipment, to accomplish the things that we want to do. And I've talked about this before in other videos about how the brain it's really been developed around the guiding principle of how can we acquire more, and how can we continuously sustain ourselves. And one of the adaptations that we have developed is to be able to move in complex ways, to be able to hunt, to run, to fight things and kill them, to eat them. This is, obviously not now. We don't really have that type of lifestyle, but our pelvis and our hips are really designed to help us stand upright and move forward. Our whole body is really designed for that. But we're going to talk about glutes, and we're going to talk about the importance of the glutes, and we're going to talk about a little bit what happens when you don't have the strength in your pelvis and in your hips and in your glutes, and the issues that probably come up from that. So I'm going to do my best to give you as much information as possible. I can't just tell you exactly what's going on in your body, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the common misperceptions. So right away, this idea about hips being tight. right? So a really common thing is people will say, I have tight hips, and so they'll want to do this kind of stretch, right? They'll be stretching their psoas, their quads. This light is not doing me any favors. See if that's a bit better. It's weird. Lighting is a funny one. So they'll get told that they have tight hip flexors, and so you'll kind of go into this position and you'll move around and you'll feel a sensation like in the front of your hip. You might feel it in your groin if you move out to the side, stuff like that. Now, that sensation, I just want to talk about that sensation right away. When you stretch, if you go like this, or you go into this position and you stretch out like that, that sensation is not a bad thing. That sensation is your body protecting itself. So at the end of the muscle, there is a tendon, and the tendon connects to other bones and other tendons and other muscles, and there's all, nothing's really, we kind of just decided that that was what was called a tendon. But at the end of the tendon, there's little receptors, and they give your brain information and just tell you whether you're safe or not, whether you've gone too far within the capacity of that muscle or area of your body. So when you go into this stretch and you feel this tightness in the front of your hips, that doesn't mean that you have like bad hips or that your hips have any inherent problems. What it does mean is that your body has never gone past that point, and so it's sending a signal to say, hey, whoa, we don't have any experience that in moving into this position. It's unsafe, and so we want you to come back. So there's a stretch. It's called a stretch reflex. And so just any part of your body that when you move and you feel that sensation, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a big problem. All it means is that you haven't been in that area before and your body's trying to keep it safe. So the next step for a lot of people is they'll get into this stretch and they'll just kind of like move forward. Now, the common compensation that everybody kind of does is they'll move forward and they'll actually just get some extension in their low back. Now, if you're already aware of this and you don't do that, and you're really conscious and aware that you need to tuck your pelvis forward and move forward, you'll notice that over time, you won't actually get very much. There's a reason for this, which is that your body adapts to the input that you give it. So if you don't train it in such a way where it feels not only safe to go to that area, but actually strong, then you're creating range of motion that is basically useless. And this is why I posted that thing on Instagram the other day about how static stretching is a waste of time. Static stretching is basically just telling your body to relax into a situation, and you're training it to just continuously relax into a situation. So if you're training your body to do that, and then you say, okay, well, I want more hip openness, and so I just keep relaxing. What you're doing is you're not actually stretching or changing the muscle. What you're doing is you're changing your relationship to that area of your body, and you're telling it that it can be there and be there safely. But that doesn't fill in the other half of the equation, which is that you want that area to be functional and usable. So the biggest misconception about hip flexibility and strength is that you need to just kind of do this and hang out in different positions until one day you get the splits. That is going to be a recipe for disaster, because you're not creating any strength in that position. So that's just really quickly some really basic stuff, is that any flexibility routine that you're doing that doesn't directly incorporate strength and challenge the newly acquired range that you created, you're not going to have any functional strength. So so that's one thing. Now, the other thing is that when you're talking about your hips, you have two legs, right? So each hip has its own situation. Now you're gonna see. I'll show you really quickly here. My right leg is very different than my left. My left leg, if I want to go internal rotation in this kind of bear sit position, and I go in, that's about as far as I can go. And then if I want to go any further, issues down there. Now, if I take this one and I drop it down, that's about as far as I can go. I can go a little further. And if I take my hand and I push it down, I can get, if I just keep relaxing and hanging out in there, I can get a lot more range. So when you're talking about hip flexibility or mobility, you have to really consider what is going on in each one of these hips that's preventing it from doing what you want it to do. And everybody has different goals. So you have to get really clear on what you want to do with your hips. So if you just say, okay, well, my hips feel really stuck and hip and I don't really know what to do about them, but I want to do more. Generally, a big and I'm being very generalized here because this is the situation we're in. I'm not in front of a human being here, so I can't tell you exactly what's going on for you. But a big thing that is happening a lot is that a lot of people have weakness in their glutes and in their lateral abductors, and they don't have a lot of strength going outward, back, and even external rotation. So if that's the case, and you're in, again, there's other issues that can start down lower, deeper into the capsule of your hip, but I'm going to assume that your hip capsule is okay. And if you want to know more about this, you can contact me and we can discuss how to figure out if your capsule is working well or not, but it's a little bit beyond what I can cover in this thing. So a lot of times people will have weakness in the outside of their hips and in their glutes. Now, this is a big problem because in order for you to move forward, what has to happen is that your foot is going to plant, and in order to move your other foot forward, you have to extend through your butt. So your butt is what drives that femur forward, okay, or backward rather. So when you squeeze your butt, your knee and your leg goes behind. And if you can't do that, what's going to happen? I've said this before in other videos, that if one joint isn't doing its job, it'll translate into other joints. So you'll start getting your knee doing more work, or your ankle doing more work, or your most likely your low back to do that extension. And that's your low back is not a hip. So you really want your hip to do hip things. So in order for this to work well, you first have to get really clear on what we're looking at. So we're looking at external rotation and extension, okay? Now, for this to work well, the first step isn't to just go online and look for external rotation and extension exercises, because what will happen a lot of times is you'll do the exercise and a lot of people, they don't even have a connection to this area. There's no awareness, right? So you can't do an exercise properly if you don't have an awareness of the area that you're actually working on. So a lot of times, biggest glute extension exercise, you wrap a mini band around your hips and you go into this kind of glute bridge. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that exercise unless you have no understanding of how to really contract that area. So what I like to do is isometrics. Isometrics are extremely effective at getting high intensity contractions and really encouraging that connection in a way that you can't really get through normal exercises. So if you're someone who doesn't feel your butt and you feel like you've done all the exercises that on the internet and you still can't feel it, I'm going to show you how to engage your glutes. Because if you can't engage your glutes, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get low back extension instead. And also you're going to get this diving in of the knee. Now, and you can see, like, if you look at my knees, my right knee, like I said, I have a lot of play in this side. And this one, that's as far as I can go. This one, I can go all the way in. So you really want to watch that and see, okay, well, which side has more internal rotation? And if you have a lot of internal rotation, you can really go there. Don't go if there's pain. Then you really want to be working on this type of exercise. Again, I'm being very generalized here. Most people have less than 0 extension in their glutes, and almost everybody needs to work on this especially if you don't work out and you don't exercise. So if you want to start to feel your ass, first of all, you can, if you want to encourage an easier transition into this, you can take a ball and you can just kind of sit on it and give it a gentle roll. Now, this isn't myofascial release. This isn't to change your fascia or anything like that. It's to give your nervous system something to relate to and gives that area that doesn't feel connected some tactile feedback. So you can do that for about 2 minutes and just feel into that whole area. You can do it on your thigh. You can do it in your hamstrings. Anywhere that feels like you haven't really touched in a long time. You can also do it with your hand. You can feel your own ass and your hamstring. Now, I'm going to give you a couple variations of how to do this depending on where you're at. But I'm going to grab some blocks here. So there's a few things here. First of all, if you have 0 hip extension, if you can, let's say and you can kind of tell if you take an inhale, okay, squeeze your abdominals, keep some air in there and create some contraction. And you can even grab a stick, okay. Grab a stick, stabilize yourself. This isn't about balance necessarily. And I want you to see if you can, right side, grab a stick, and see if you can move your leg back just by squeezing your butt. Okay? And if you can't do this easily, and you're doing this, and you have no control, or better yet, if you plant that right leg and you take a little step forward by squeezing your glutes, if you can't feel the connection and you feel like you're doing this in your low back, then you probably have very little extension. Now, it's a really non-scientific way of and special, easy. It's not a very precise way of measuring it, but if you can't demonstrate control of the area and you feel super tight in the front of your hip, in your front of your leg, then you probably don't have a lot of hip extension. I'm very surprised if any of you do have good hip extension. So what I want you to do is lie down on the floor, and you're going to just let your body rest. And what we're going to try to do is you're going to try to lift your leg. You're going to bend your leg to make it a little easier because the long leg is going to be hard. So if I'm doing my right leg, I'm going to bend my knee. And I'm going to brace the rest of my body. So you're going to contract your abdominals. So if you don't know how to do that, just do it to the best of your ability. Try to avoid arching in your low back. And what I want you to do is just try to lift your leg, this right leg, off the ground using your glute. Okay? Just try that first. So I'm not lifting a lot, but just see if you can lift at all. Okay? Now, if you can't do that, I want you to take a pause, just relax. We're going to do it again, but I want you to add some intensity. So I want you to really think about that area of your body. And I want you to really visualize that your knee is coming off the ground, and we're going to hold it for 10 seconds. So you're going to take an inhale, you're going to pack some air into your abdominals, you're going to try to squeeze your abs as much as you possibly, you're going to avoid arching your low back, and you're going to try to lift that knee off the ground with as much intensity as you can. What's up, Dom? So we're going to get down here, okay? I want you to connect to your butt, feel into your butt, have your body as flat as you can. Put your head on the floor, okay? And bend your knee, bring your knee as close to your butt as you can. Stabilize your other leg. Take an inhale, squeeze, and I want you to try to lift that knee as high up off the ground as you can and hold. Even if you can't feel it a lot, try to hold that glute contraction for as long as you can. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And slowly put it down. Don't let it fall. Okay? So this is a really good way to intentionally connect to the part that you're having trouble connecting to, rather than just going onto your back and doing mindless glute bridges, which have almost no intensity and no high amount of neural drive. This will allow you to focus on the one area that you're having trouble with. So this is a very simple, and if you can't lift off the ground, that's okay. The point is not to lift off the ground. The point is to connect to that part of your body and create as much of a contraction in that part of your body as you can. And from there, there's a lot, we can go a lot of different directions. So just being really mindful of your movement rather than mindless will get you a lot further. And you can do the same thing. We'll do the same thing. If you're one of those people who does these sideline clams, now I'm not a huge fan of those for a bunch of reasons I won't get into, but I'm trying to meet you guys where you're at. You probably have done a lot of these like traditional fitness exercises. So let's say you're one of these people who does a sideline clam and you're just doing this, okay? A lot of times what'll happen is you'll have like, mostly your TFL and maybe a little bit of your quad, other things going on that is not your glute and not your glute med and other kinds of stuff and your stabilizers in there. So if you're going to choose to do this exercise, and if you want to really amp up the intentionality of it and amp up the intention of the contraction, you can create, and there's different variations of this, but we're going to use one with no props because you guys probably don't have props. So making sure your pelvis is straight, that's a huge one. Make sure that your pelvis is in line with the floor. Don't let it drop down. So really intentionally roll that forward. And from the ankle, so the ankle here, I want you to pretend like that ankle is going into the other ankle as a pivot point. Okay, hips rolled forward, brace your abdominals, and you're going to lift up for a count of 5. You're going to hold for 3 and then back down for 5. And you're going to really intentionally think about all this stuff on the side and all of your glutes. Don't let your knee come forward. If you feel like your knee's coming forward, drag it back, push it back against toward behind you without letting your low back extend. Okay, so create some abdominal pressure, create some tension, and you can even brace yourself against the floor. Make sure your pelvis is rolled forward. Drive that heel into the other heel and lift for 5, 4. Squeeze everything. 3, 2, 1. And I'm really twisting and rotating this femur out to the back, to the side. Hold and slowly back down. 5, 4. Using everything here to control. 3, 2, 1. Good. And you can do one more. I'll do one more. So inhale, roll the pelvis forward, squeeze the abdominals, drive up, push that heel into the other heel. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold, and slowly back down. 5, 4, 3. Always trying to amp up that contraction in the side and the back. 3, take one exercise and amp up the intensity just by intention, just by creating more tension over time and slowing down the contraction. So these are very simple ways for you to just kind of start building awareness. There's a lot of different exercises that I prescribe my clients and that I work depending on your situation. These are very superficial muscle things that help the superficial muscles kind of do their job. But the tricky thing about this is that if you have an issue deep down in the deeper parts of your anatomy and you don't have actually any room between the two bones that are moving, you're going to have a really hard time even ever doing any sort of mobility stuff without addressing that stuff first. That's a bit more complicated to get into depending on the person. So I'm not going to get into that now, but just know that there is no blanket answer. There is no 6 best exercises for hip mobility. There's no 15-minute hip routine that's going to give you what you need. You need what you need, and that's going to be dependent on what's going on in your hip and in your joints, and you need an assessment to do that. So I'm going to check out what other questions I had here. So passive tissue. Yeah, so this is another thing. This whole piriformis. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like I know everything about all anatomy, but if you have someone, if you're somebody who you were given this stretch, the piriformis stretch, right? You're not going to really ever alleviate the tension in that area by just stretching it, because like I said, you're not changing the biology. The only way that you can change the biology is if you give it tension and you give it strength input. So the only way it adapts is if you bring it into a different area and then challenge it through strength input. And there's ways of doing that if you're interested, if you're somebody who you're like, oh wow, like I really want to know how to do this properly, that's something I can help you with. But what I really wanted to do was just kind of like in this video especially offer that flexibility is more than meets the eye. It's not what you think it is. And it took me a decent amount of time to discover that. So don't feel bad and it's really easy I could make a million videos of me just doing, hip movements and say, oh yeah, this is the best hip stuff. And it's really just to hook people in to buy products. And that's not the way I function. I'm not interested in just giving you information to hook you in and make you feel like you need something from me that you don't, or even just give you bad information. I'm really interested in giving you the real shit, which is that this stuff takes time and you need to understand like what's actually going on inside, and you need to have the motivation to discover that for yourself. It's really hard to do that. I have had issues that have taken me years. I've had a shoulder issue that took me over 2 years to deal with. So if you're looking for a quick fix, I'm definitely not the person for you. And these videos that I'm doing are really intended to give you the framework to better inform yourself and not hurt yourself. And get really real with yourself that like, this is not mobility. This will not give you any more space in your hips. This will not help you develop real mobility and strength and flexibility. Or any sort of other splits routine. There's a lot of people who will grab a weight and they'll show a progression of them doing a passive splits, and eventually they'll be on the floor. That is a dangerous way to train. It's not a good way for you to build integrity and strength in your body. So I hope this was informative. And oh, hey, what's up, Joe? Yeah, I hope this was informative. And if you have any other questions, shoot me a line and I'll be happy to answer them. I know that this was, again, these videos are not going to be what you think they are. I'm not going to go on here and I'm going to here, follow my cool hip routine. Like, that's not how I work. And that's not what works. It's the internet has made it seem really easy to get stuff done, and that's not how it works. So yeah, have any questions, shoot me a line. If not, I hope you guys have a sweet day, and we'll see you tomorrow.